I used to have 3 million followers, a feed that looked like a dream, and a calendar booked with brand trips to paradise. I had everything I was supposed to want. But I remember this one night, sitting on the cold tile of my bathroom floor at 3 a.m., phone in my hand, scrolling through thousands of comments telling me how perfect my life was, while I was silently having a panic attack, completely and utterly alone. That was my secret. My entire life was a beautiful, sparkling, perfectly filtered lie, and it was about to shatter.
That feeling of being trapped inside a life that looks perfect from the outside is something so many of us know. Today, we're hearing the powerful story of Cassidy Moore from California, a woman who had to lose her identity to truly find herself. I'm your host, Susan Bentley, and this is Unbroken Women, where we share the stories of women who found the strength to redefine their own lives.
My world was a 1080 pixel square. My day started not with the sun, but with the blue light of my phone, checking analytics from overnight. Did the post perform? What was the engagement rate? Before I even had coffee, I knew my value for the day. Breakfast wasn't about hunger, it was a content opportunity. An artfully arranged avocado toast, a latte with a perfect foam heart. I'd take 50 photos just to get the one that looked effortless. My apartment was less of a home and more of a studio set, with a beige aesthetic that was great for brand deals. My job was me. I was the product. Cassidy Moore, the brand. The girl who was always smiling, always on a beach, always wearing the latest trend. I was selling a fantasy, and honestly, I was my own best customer. I truly believed that if I could just perfect the image, the happiness would have to be real. I remember thinking, if I can just hit 5 million followers, then I'll feel secure. Then I'll be happy. Then I'll be enough. It was a finish line that I just kept moving further and further away. Behind the screen, I was suffocating. The weight of being on all the time was crushing. Every meal was a calculation of calories versus photo worthiness. I called it wellness, but it was an eating disorder and a pretty package. I'd scroll through other girls' feeds, a toxic habit of comparison that would leave me feeling hollow and worthless. Why wasn't my waist that small? Why wasn't my trip that glamorous? I felt like a total fraud because the happy, confident girl on the screen had nothing to do with the anxious, lonely person I was in reality. The constant hum of anxiety was my baseline. My heart would race every time I posted, waiting for the validation to roll in. A like was a tiny hit of approval. A negative comment could ruin my entire day. I was living my life for the approval of strangers. And the deep, dark secret was that I didn't even like the person I was pretending to be. The first crack was so small I almost missed it. I was at a coffee shop, editing a photo of myself laughing on a beach. I was trying to make my teeth look whiter, and I looked up and saw this elderly couple sitting by the window. They weren't doing anything special. He was reading the paper, she was just looking out at the street, and she reached over and patted his hand. It was a simple, quiet, real moment. There was no camera, no audience, and I felt this gut punch of jealousy. It was so profound, it made me put my phone down. I had thousands of photos of me laughing, but I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt a moment of quiet connection like that. A thought just popped into my head, uninvited and terrifying. What if none of this is real? I pushed it down, of course. I had a deadline for a sponsored post, but the whisper was there now. A tiny seed of doubt planted in the perfect sterile soil of my feed. The thing that brought it all down wasn't some grand catastrophe. It was a single comment. I had posted a heavily edited photo from a trip to Bali, sponsored by a tea company that promised inner peace. I was in a yoga pose I couldn't actually hold, on a cliff I was terrified of, with a smile plastered on my face. An anonymous account commented, I was there the same day. Saw you take this. You spent an hour screaming at your assistant and almost cried when you chipped a nail. You're the fakest person on this app. And then it went viral. People started screenshotting it. It was everywhere. The comment section, usually a stream of heart emojis, became a torrent of hate. Fraud, liar, fake. The notifications were coming in so fast, my phone was just vibrating constantly in my hand, like it was having a seizure. It felt like the whole world was pointing and laughing. The beautiful illusion I'd spent years building was being ripped to shreds in real time. I felt exposed, naked, and utterly humiliated. I couldn't breathe. In a complete panic, my only thought was to make it stop, make it all go away. I went to my profile, and with my thumb shaking uncontrollably, I just started deleting. One picture, then another, then entire chunks. In 15 minutes of frantic, desperate tapping, I erased my entire online existence. My whole life. Gone. The moment it was done, a terrifying silence fell. My phone stopped buzzing, my feed was just a blank white screen, and my first thought wasn't relief, it was pure, cold terror. What have I done? My manager, Mark, was calling, his name flashing on the screen. I ignored it. I started pacing my apartment, my mind racing. Okay, I can fix this. It's not a big deal. I'll just go dark for a day, then I'll come back with a tearful apology video. I'll talk about mental health. People love that. I can spin this. I was trying to strategize, to put the mask back on, but it wouldn't fit anymore. Underneath the denial was a much deeper fear. If I wasn't Cassidy Moore, the influencer, then who was I? My entire identity, my income, my friendships, they were all tied to that profile. The thought of losing it all, of having to face the world without my filter and my follower count, was paralyzing. It felt like a death. I curled up on my sofa and just stared at the blank wall, my heart pounding in my chest, completely and utterly terrified of what came next. I stayed offline for 72 hours, 3 days of total silence. At first, it was just a constant, twitchy urge to check my phone, a phantom limb I kept reaching for. But by the third day, something else set in, a profound, echoing emptiness. Without the constant input of likes, comments, and DMs, there was nothing. I tried to watch a movie, but I couldn't focus. I tried to read a book, but the words were just shapes on a page. All the noise that had filled my life was gone, and I was left alone with myself, a person I didn't know. That evening, I walked past a mirror and caught my reflection. I just stopped and stared. Without the makeup, the perfect lighting, the practiced smile, I had no idea who was looking back at me. And that's when I broke. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a complete implosion. I slid down the wall and just sat there as this wave of panic washed over me. I couldn't feel my hands, my breath was shallow, and I had this terrifying sensation that I was literally dissolving, that I was nothing more than a collection of pixels, and someone had just hit delete. That was my rock bottom. The realization that my entire sense of self was built on a foundation of digital sand. After the panic attack subsided, there was a strange, hollowed-out calm. I felt like I had nothing left to lose, because I just realized I had nothing to begin with. And in that quiet, a single clear thought rose to the surface. I can never go back. Not to the constant performing, not to the anxiety, not to the person who would dissolve when the internet was turned off. The decision to quit, for real this time, wasn't a brave choice. It felt like the only choice I had left to survive. It was terrifying. It meant walking away from my career, my income, the only life I'd known for years. It felt like stepping off a cliff into total darkness. But for the first time, the choice was for me. The real, terrified person sitting on the floor, and not for my audience. It was the first authentic decision I had made in a very long time.
Taking the first step was the hardest part. I re-downloaded the app one last time. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I didn't post a picture, just a block screen, and a few lines of text. Hi everyone, I need to be honest. I haven't been okay for a long time. I need to find out who I am without all of this. I'm taking an indefinite break from social media. Thank you for everything. Goodbye. It was raw, unplanned, and terrifyingly real. There was no strategy, no spin, just the truth. I hit post, and my heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I watched the first few comments roll in, a mix of confusion, support, and anger. Then, before I could get sucked back in, I logged out of every account and deleted the apps from my phone. The finality of it was deafening. The silence in my apartment felt huge, a vacuum where my old life used to be. I was terrified, but underneath the fear, there was a tiny, fragile spark of something else. Freedom.
The world I had built did not want to let me go. Mark, my manager, was furious. The phone calls were relentless. You're throwing away a multi-million-dollar career, Cassidy. For what? To go find yourself? This is career suicide. He threatened to sue me for breach of contract on brand deals I could no longer fulfill. The financial pressure was immediate and immense. Then came the friends. My influencer circle, the girls I took brunch photos with and went on brand trips with, they just vanished. My calls went unanswered. I was no longer useful to them. I wasn't an asset to their engagement. The silence from them was more painful than the hate comments had ever been. I was completely, utterly isolated. I had built a life surrounded by people, but I had no real community. I'd go for walks and see girls posing for photos, and I'd feel this bizarre mix of pity and envy. I was free from the performance, but I was also an outcast from the only world I knew. The loneliness was a physical presence, a constant ache in my chest. The world was telling me I had made a catastrophic mistake. The external battle was hard, but the war inside my own head was worse. The addiction was real. My thumb would constantly move to where the Instagram icon used to be. I craved the dopamine hit of a notification, the validation of a like. Some nights I'd lie awake in a cold sweat, my mind screaming at me to just go back. It wasn't that bad, a voice would whisper. At least you mattered. At least people saw you. I felt invisible. I'd walk down the street and feel like a ghost. Without my online presence, did I even exist? The doubt was a constant companion. Every bill that came in, every lonely evening, I would question my decision. I had thrown away a life that people dreamed of. And for what? To be broke and alone in a quiet apartment? The comfort of the familiar pain was so tempting. A siren call promising me that if I just came back, I could be somebody again. The breaking point came about 6 months in. My savings were gone. I was selling my designer clothes and bags online just to make rent. Finally, I had to do the one thing I never thought I would. I got a regular job. I started working at a local coffee shop, making minimum wage. The humiliation was profound. One day, a girl came in who used to follow me. She recognized me, looked at my apron, and just smirked. "Wow," she said, "look how the mighty have fallen." I went into the back room and just sobbed. That night, sitting in my half-empty apartment eating instant noodles, I felt like a complete and utter failure. I hadn't found some noble, authentic self. I had just destroyed my life. I had nothing. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over the App Store, ready to download it all again, ready to call Mark, to beg for my old life back, no matter how miserable it had been. I was done. I was defeated. I don't know why I didn't do it. Maybe it was just sheer exhaustion. Instead of calling Mark, I put on my shoes and just started walking. I ended up at a park I'd never been to before. I sat on a bench, and for the first time, I just noticed things. The way the late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves of a tree. The sound of kids laughing. There was no pressure to capture it, to post it, to perform my enjoyment of it. It just was. On a whim, I walked to a little art supply store I saw across the street and bought a cheap sketchbook and a charcoal pencil. I went back to the park and I started to sketch the fountain. I hadn't drawn anything since I was a little kid. It was clumsy and amateurish, but as I was doing it, I felt something. A quiet, focused joy. A feeling that came from inside me, not from a screen. It was small, but it was real. And it was enough. That sketchbook became my life raft. My new routine was work, walk, and draw. I started filling pages with sketches of people in the coffee shop, trees in the park, my own hands. I wasn't good, not at first, but I was consistent. It was an activity that required nothing from me but my presence. One day, I saw a flyer for a community art class. The thought of walking into a room full of strangers was terrifying, but the thought of not going was worse, so I went. And for the first time in years, I introduced myself not as an influencer, but just as Cassidy. I met people who were passionate about creating things, not just curating images. We talked about light and shadow and perspective. No one asked me what my follower count was. I was slowly, painstakingly building a new life, one that was small and quiet and completely my own. A year after my last post, my art class held a small show at a local gallery. I had 3 pieces hanging on the wall. They weren't perfect, but they were mine. Seeing them there, under the gallery lights, I felt a sense of pride that was so much deeper and more real than any viral post had ever given me. People came and looked at my work, and I talked to them about my process. That night, I sold a piece. A stranger connected with something I had created for my own soul and wanted to make it a part of their life. The validation was real. It was tangible. It wasn't a fleeting digital heart. It was a human connection. I was no longer a brand. I was an artist. I was myself. If I could speak to that girl crying on the bathroom floor, the one who measured her worth in likes, I would just wrap her in a hug. I tell her, you are so much more than an image. Your value is not determined by an algorithm. It's okay to be messy and real and unseen. It's okay to be quiet. And I tell her the most important thing I've learned. Your worth isn't measured in likes. True connection with yourself and with the world begins the moment you're brave enough to disconnect.
Thank you, Cassidy, for sharing such a vulnerable and inspiring story of true self-discovery. What did Cassidy's journey bring up for you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from this community. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to Unbroken Women for more stories of resilience. And if you were moved by today's story, you won't want to miss our next one. Until then, be kind to yourselves.